This is not the story of a disappearance. This is the story of Shasta Groene, 8 years old, brown hair, bright eyes, the kind of smile that makes strangers feel like they already know her. She lives in a house near Lodge Idaho, a small rural stretch of road that hugs the edge of Lake Coeur d'Alene, where the trees grow thick and the water glints silver in the afternoon sun. It is the kind of place where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, where neighbors wave at each other without knowing why, where you feel in your bones that the world is a manageable place. Shasta feels that too. She is the youngest of 3 siblings, and she knows it. She is the smallest in the Groene household, small enough that her older brothers Slade and Dylan can carry her around, tease her, protect her, and she handles all of them, every single one, with a fearlessness that makes her mother, Brenda, laugh, because Shasta knows exactly what she is. She is the baby of the family, and she wears that like a crown. She loves being treated like a princess. She will tell you so herself. But she is not fragile, not even close. She can hold her own against boys twice her size. She can walk into any room, and within minutes, she is the center of it. Not because she is loud, not because she demands attention, but because of that smile, that wide, uncomplicated, completely genuine smile that makes you feel like you are the only person she was hoping to see. Her best friend, Sierra, who lives about a quarter-mile away across a big open field, has seen that smile 1,000 times. They ride the school bus together every morning. They turn that field between their houses into their whole world, making up stories, building things out of nothing, disappearing into the kind of play that children do when time feels infinite. Shasta loves school. She tells people that. It is one of the things she says when she is talking about herself. I love school. She loves her mother. She loves being her mom's little helper around the house, trailing behind Brenda in the kitchen, putting things away, folding things, being useful. Brenda Groene is 40 years old, a strong, complicated, warm woman who has built a life for her children in the Idaho Panhandle with everything she has. She has been through a divorce from the kid's father, Steve. She has started over, and now finally it feels like things are working. Her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie, has moved in after 4 years of dating. Mark is the kind of man that people describe as reminding them of a cartoon character, warm, big-hearted, a little goofy in the best possible way. He grew up around Wolf Lodge. He knows these roads. He knows these people. And he loves Brenda's kids as if they were his own, every single one of them. Slade is 13, Dylan is 9, Shasta is 8. They are a family, and it feels in the spring of 2005 like it is finally working. Quick question before we continue. Are you one of those people who listens to true crime while cooking, driving, cleaning, or are you fully locked in, lights dimmed, volume up? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know who's staying up way too late solving mysteries with me. If you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I drop a new real case every single week. Now, let's keep going. The spring of 2005 arrives quietly in Wolf Lodge. The snow is gone, the lake is wide and still and the color of slate in the early mornings. The kids are in school. Brenda and Mark are figuring out their life together the way couples do day by day, moment by moment. Mark makes them laugh. Brenda keeps the house warm. Slade does teenager things. Dylan and Shasta run around outside in the grass, in their swimsuits when it's warm enough, just being kids. That image, the two of them outside in their swimsuits, in the yard is important. Hold on to it. Because somewhere on Interstate 90, a man is driving west. He is not from Idaho. He is from Fargo, North Dakota, though he has lived in other places too. Tacoma, Minnesota. Wherever the wind took him and wherever the law wasn't watching. His name is Joseph Edward Duncan III. He is 42 years old, and he is, by every clinical and legal definition, one of the most dangerous human beings alive in America, in the spring of 2005. He has been in prison since he was 16. He has a registered sex offender designation in multiple states. A judge in Minnesota has just set his bail at $15,000 for a new child molestation charge, a charge that, if he is convicted, will send him back to prison for the rest of his life. A friend writes him a personal check for $15,000. Duncan posts bail, and then he runs. A federal warrant goes out almost immediately, but Duncan is already gone. He drives west on Interstate 90, heading nowhere in particular, which is the most dangerous kind of heading. And somewhere along that drive through the Idaho Panhandle, he passes the growing house right there just off the highway. He can see it from the road. He can see the children playing in the yard. He pulls off. He does not move on. He does not keep driving. He begins to watch. May 15th, 2005. A Sunday. The day's warm and social. A few friends drift by the Wolf Lodge house, which turns into a small barbecue. The way those evenings do, one person becomes three becomes eight. The yard fills up. Laughter spills out. Brenda is there. Mark is there. The kids are around. It is an ordinary Idaho evening, the kind that smells like cut grass and charcoal and belonging. Some of the guests will later recall a minor verbal argument between Mark and one of his friends, nothing alarming, the kind of thing that happens and is forgotten by morning. No one remembers anything that should have worried them. The guests go home, the house goes quiet. Brenda, Mark, Slade, Dylan, and Shasta settle in for the night. And then, in the darkest part of the early morning hours of May 16th, while that house is completely still, Joseph Duncan comes to the door. He has been watching for 2 days. He knows the layout. He knows who is inside. He came prepared with a shotgun, with night vision goggles, with zip ties and duct tape. He has thought about this carefully. He breaks in. He orders Brenda at gunpoint to gather the family. Shasta's asleep. Her mother's voice wakes her, calling her into the living room. She goes, "The way children do when their mothers call them in the night. She has no idea what she is walking into." And then the next few minutes of her life are the worst minutes any child has ever had to survive. She sees her family bound. She hears Mark cry out. She watches her brother Slade stagger, bleeding. She is zip-tied herself, and so is Dylan. Duncan takes the children outside to the yard, leaves them near the swing set while he goes back inside. Shasta later told investigators that she could hear what was happening. She was 8 years old. She heard everything. Brenda Groene, Mark McKenzie, Slade Groene, all killed with a hammer. She was there. And then everything stopped. When Kootenai County deputies arrived at the Wolf Lodge residence on the morning of Monday, May 16th, 2005, they were responding to a concerned neighbor's call. What they found inside was not something they had been prepared for. Blood, bound bodies. 3 people, a mother, her teenage son, her boyfriend, killed with brutal force. The house was a crime scene unlike anything this part of Idaho had seen. A triple homicide was unheard of here. Investigators moved through the rooms with a growing, sick dread. And then someone realized the 2 youngest children weren't there. No Shasta, no Dylan. An Amber Alert went out within hours. Photographs of the 2 kids smiling, bright-eyed, normal, were distributed to news stations, posted on highways, printed and taped to windows. Brenda's mother, Darlene, drove along the interstate and couldn't believe what she was seeing signs with her grandchildren's faces, asking if anyone had seen them. It didn't feel real. None of this felt real. The search for Shasta and Dylan widened. Investigators canvassed the area. They spoke to everyone who had been at the barbecue the night before. They looked at friends. They looked at acquaintances. They talked to Mark's friend who'd had the argument with him. They pulled records and ran names and chased down every lead that presented itself in those first frantic days. Detectives worked through the night, then the next night, then the next. The FBI was called in. The Kootenai County Sheriff's Office held press conferences. State Patrol got involved. The community around Wolf Lodge, around all of Coeur d'Alene, held its breath. And everyone kept looking for her. There is a particular quality to the silence when a child is missing. It is not the absence of sound. The phones were ringing constantly, tips, calls, condolences, reporters, the investigators were talking, the neighbors were talking, the news was talking. But underneath all of that noise, there was a silence that the people who knew Shasta and Dylan understood completely. It lived in specific places. It lived in the field between Shasta's house and Sierra's house, that stretch of open land where two little girls had built their whole imaginary world, and now only one of them was there to remember it. It lived in the school bus that pulled up every morning and departed with one fewer passenger. It lived in Brenda Groene's house, which was now a crime scene, sealed with yellow tape, where 3 people had been murdered and 2 children had been taken. The swing set in the yard was still there, the children's things were still inside. A home that had been warm and full of laughter just 4 days ago was now the center of a federal investigation. 1 week passed, then 2. Darlene, Shasta's grandmother, watched the Amber Alert signs on the highway every time she drove past. She prayed, she waited. Friends of the family organized searches and held vigils. People who had never met the Gruenes held fundraisers. The community gathered, because that is what communities do when they cannot think of what else to do. They gather and they hope together. But 3 weeks passed, and the search for Shasta and Dylan did not bring them home. 4 weeks. 5. The leads were thin. Investigators had little forensic evidence pointing them in a clear direction. They looked at the people who had been at the house that night. They investigated the acquaintance who'd argued with Mark, but nothing connected, nothing held. The trail felt like smoke visible in the distance, impossible to grab. Then, quietly, investigators began to focus on another name. A federal warrant had been issued weeks earlier before the murders for a man named Joseph Edward Duncan III, a registered sex offender who had skipped bail on a child molestation charge in Minnesota. He was known to drive the I-90 corridor. He had a documented history of predatory behavior toward children. There was no direct physical evidence linking him to Wolf Lodge, not yet. But the profile fit, the timing fit, and investigators kept pulling on that thread. None of it brought them home. Not yet. The community kept the Amber Alert posters up. Gas stations, libraries, church bulletin boards. Shasta's face and Dylan's face looking out at strangers from laminated paper. A 9-year-old, an 8-year-old. The poster said, "If you see them, please call." 40 days passed. Then 45. Then 47. The early morning of July 2nd, 2005. It is just after midnight. Technically the small dark hours when diners are mostly empty and the staff is running on coffee and habit. A Denny's restaurant in Kootenai, Idaho. A man walks in with a little girl. The waitress notices the girl. Something about her catches. The girl is quiet. She is small. She is sitting across from this man, not really talking, not really eating, just existing in that careful, watchful way that children sometimes do when they are not entirely okay. There are posters in this town. There have been posters for 47 days. Everyone in Coeur d'Alene knows those 2 faces. A customer named Nick Chapman is in the restaurant that night. He looks at the girl. Something moves in his chest. He looks again. She looks up at him. Later, Shasta herself described that moment. "I looked up and saw this guy," she said. "He looked at me and I nodded my head. He nodded back. And I could tell from his eyes that he knew who I was. I was trying to tell him through my eyes that it was me." Nick Chapman goes to the waitress. The waitress approaches Shasta's table. She gives the girl a coloring book, calm, steady, keeping things normal, while the manager dials 911. The staff position themselves so the man cannot leave without being noticed. Police arrive. Joseph Edward Duncan III does not resist. And Shasta Groene, 8 years old, 47 days gone, comes home. What happened during those 47 days is the part of this story that is the hardest to carry. Shasta told investigators everything she could remember. because she is brave, because she is the toughest 8-year-old who has ever lived, because she understood, even then, that what she knew mattered. Duncan had taken the children deep into the wilderness to a remote makeshift campsite in the Lolo National Forest near Street Regis, Montana, miles from any road, miles from any person. The forest closed in on every side. He kept them there, he abused them, both of them, for weeks. She watched her brother Dylan, 9 years old, the big brother who was just a year older than her, the one she grew up running around with. She watched him be killed, shot at point blank range by a man who had taken everything from their family in a single night and was not finished. And then she was alone. She later told investigators that Duncan nearly killed her in the days that followed Dylan's death. He gave her a choice, an unspeakable, impossible choice that no child should ever have to face. She chose one, he started to follow through, and then she called him by his nickname Jet, the name he had told him to use, and something in him stopped. I honestly have no idea what gave me strength or hope, Shasta has said. But something did. Something in her refused. The day before they went to Denny's, Duncan had told her he wanted to take her to North Dakota to meet his mother. Shasta had spent the last weeks doing what survivors do, reading the room, building whatever fragile trust she could, staying alive. I was trying to earn his trust, she said. Make him believe that I didn't want to leave his side. I would tell him that I wanted to show him all the places I grew up in, where I went to school, because I loved school, where I used to hang out. Basically showing my life because I had no family. She was 8 years old, and she was negotiating for her own survival. On July 2nd, they stopped at a gas station in Lodge, Idaho, 40 miles east of Coeur d'Alene. Security cameras captured them both. A store employee recognized her face, but didn't act in time. Hours later, Duncan asked Shasta if she was hungry. She said, not really. He said, come on, we can go to Denny's and get a milkshake or something. She said, okay. And the rest, as they say, the rest is how she came home. On July 4th, 2005, investigators found human remains at the campsite in the Lolo National Forest. The remains were sent to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. DNA testing confirmed what the community had been dreading. It was Dylan Groene, 9 years old. He would have turned 10 on July 16th. More than 700 people attended his funeral, held on that same day, his birthday. They gathered at the same church where they had already mourned Brenda, Slade, and Mark. The pastor spoke. The community wept. And a boy who loved running around outside with his little sister was laid to rest, while the whole of North Idaho held its hands together and asked a question that had no answer. Why, Joseph Edward Duncan III was charged with multiple counts of murder and kidnapping in multiple jurisdictions. He stood trial. He pleaded guilty. In 2008, he was sentenced to death. After his arrest, the FBI launched a nationwide review of unsolved missing child cases, and Duncan was connected to at least 2 additional murders. 11-year-old Samiejo White and 9-year-old Carmen Cubias, 2 girls who disappeared in Seattle in 1996. Their remains had been found in 1998. Their cases had gone cold. Shasta's rescue and Duncan's arrest finally gave those families some of the truth they had been waiting for. In Coeur d'Alene, Shasta went to live with her father, Steve Groene. She was home, she was safe, and she was the most traumatized child in America, carrying memories that no adult should have to carry, let alone a little girl who had just finished 2nd grade. In the year after she came home, Shasta tried to find her way back to ordinary life. She went back to school. She saw Sierra, her best friend, for the first time since before everything. Sierra later remembered that moment with quiet grief. With everything that had happened, there was no way she was going to be the same. It just hurt to see her like that. No matter what people had said or tried to prepare me for, nothing was the same. The sunny disposition was gone. The lightness was gone. What was left was a little girl carrying something enormous in a small body, trying to hold it, and also go to class, and also eat lunch, and also figure out how to exist in a world that still had math tests and recess and birthday parties. By the time she was 12, the weight had become unbearable in the way that weight does when no one helps you put it down. She started using drugs at 14, meth primarily. Pretty much anything I could get my hands on that made me feel like a different person, I would do, she said in a 2015 interview. She had run-ins with law enforcement. She was sent to a juvenile facility. She fought her way back out. By the time she was in her late teens, she had been clean for 2 years and was expecting her first child. She told an interviewer then that she wanted to write a book someday, that she wanted to help other survivors. In March of 2021, Joseph Edward Duncan III died in federal prison from stage 4 brain cancer. He was 58 years old. When Shasta heard the news, she said this: "For so long I've been struggling with hate towards that man. Today I woke up feeling like my soul was finally free. I hope other people affected by Joseph Duncan were able to wake up feeling the same way." Shasta Groene would be 28 years old today. Think about that for a moment. 28. She is not a missing girl. She is not a case number. She is not a poster on a gas station wall. She is a woman living in Boise, Idaho with her husband and 5 sons. 5 boys. She works as a supervising housekeeper at a hotel. She shows up. She does the work. She is sharp and funny and warm, according to everyone who knows her. Greg Olson, the true crime author who spent years working with her on her book, says she is all the things you would want in somebody who would be your friend. He also says she carries a heavier load than most people will ever understand. In 2025, 20 years after that night in May, Shasta published her story. The book is called Out of the Woods: A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. She went back to Coeur d'Alene for a book signing. She stood in a room full of people who had prayed for her as a child, and she told them what happened. Not the parts they already knew, all of it. The before, the during, the after. Previously, she said, people who did bother to look at my life saw only my problems. This time, we explored the why. Self-reflection helped me understand my experiences and myself better. She went out into the world and told her own story, on her own terms. That is not nothing. That is everything. Here is what I keep thinking about. Nick Chapman, the customer at Denny's who made eye contact with Shasta in the dark hours of July 2nd, 2005. He didn't know what he was going to find when he walked into that restaurant. He wasn't looking for her. He just looked up, and something moved in him, and he acted. The waitress who gave Shasta a coloring book, the manager who dialed 911, the employees who stayed calm, the gas station worker in Kellogg who recognized the footage on the security camera and called it in even though she wasn't sure, a grandmother who saw the amber alert signs on the highway and refused to stop, hoping, a community that kept the posters up for 47 days, and one 8-year-old girl who decided, somehow in a remote campsite in Montana, surrounded by wilderness, with nothing left and no one coming, that she was not done. She negotiated for her own life. She communicated through her eyes in a crowded diner. She survived the unsurvivable, and then because survival is not a finish line, it is a door, she kept going. This is still her story, and it is not finished. If this case moved you, if Shasta's story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, drop a comment below. Tell me what part of this hit hardest. Tell me what you're thinking. I read every single one. And if you want to make sure you never miss a case like this, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell. There is a new story dropping every week, and every single one of them belongs to someone who deserves to have their name remembered. Shasta Groene McLean, mother, survivor, author. She walked out of the woods, and she has never stopped walking forward.